We call this Canada's most haunted town. Has anybody heard that term before? Yeah? Maybe? Brochure?
Yep.
Website? Yeah. It's part of our marketing, but it's not just a marketing ploy. I believe this to be real because of the history of this town. Now, I'm sure everybody here, you guys have heard of the War of 1812, correct? Good. Still, you guys heard of it? Still teaching history in the schools? Now this town here was a pivotal point for the entire war because it was when the United States invaded Canada. Now I have to ask before any of my tours, are either of you Americans? The group? No? So I can speak freely? Yes. Excellent. So the United States would invade Canada at this point, trying to take it over. And as they are coming into this land, everyone is calling the war for the Americans because most of the real British soldiers were fighting Napoleon over in Europe. So the Americans knew this was the best time to attack all of the reserves. So everybody's calling it, and even some of the British politicians would turn and go to the other side. And from the beginning, it looks like this is going to happen because they'll come into this town, the former capital, and they'll steamroll it, destroy Fort George, take over the rest of the town, and they would hold it for 7 months straight. The best parts of the war for the Americans, because at the end of the 7 months, 2 battles would occur. Lundy's Lane and Stony Creek. Battles the British should have lost. Outmanned, outgunned, but for some reason through strategy they would win these battles, turn the tides of the war, and are now coming back for their former capital. And as they're marching back, the American soldiers will say, "Don't bother fighting them off. It's not worth the lives. However, before you leave, on a very cold winter's night, burn everything to the ground." So when the British soldiers arrive, what they find of their former capital, just the charred remains of all those buildings. And then what they find in the woods surrounding this town would turn the war very dark. Women and children frozen to death. So when the British soldiers saw this, they immediately wanted revenge, going to Fort Niagara in Youngstown, New York, taking over the fort, burning everything from Youngstown to Buffalo, including Buffalo. And at this point, the Americans say, "Stop. No more innocent lives need to be lost. Let's sign a treaty." And the British agree. However, one American regiment doesn't get the memo, and another village is burnt at Fort Erie. And this is the reason why the British will march on Washington, D.C. Going down there, they will successfully burn the White House, burn the Capitol, set the entire town on fire. And if it wasn't for an act of God, Washington would have been lost. But as the British marched out, the rain clouds opened up and the rains came down and put out all of the fires. But guess what? None of this actually mattered, because at this point the war was already done. The lines had been drawn and people already started to rebuild. And that's where we get the original buildings of this town that house the ghosts we're going to talk about this evening. Follow me to the first stop.